Hello, and welcome to Archives and Records Simplified. These videos are aimed at people looking for basic knowledge about archives and records management, although at times I will also touch slightly on information and library science. These videos are designed to provide bite-sized chunks, which means that almost every video will be less than 15 minutes. These videos are honestly for everyone, and comments and suggestions are always more than welcome. About me, Sean McMillan. I'm an archivist based in London, and you can learn more about me via my LinkedIn profile, to which there is a link posted below. And I'll also post a transcript and notes also if you struggle at any point to understand my accent. And lastly, if you enjoy these videos, I would be extremely grateful if you could kindly like, subscribe and share. Thanks again. Okay, so this video is some suggested technologies for information professionals. So first of all, a quick overview here. These are a few general technologies. That is to say that this is not aimed specifically at archivists or specifically for librarians or museum curators, but maybe just anyone that manages information. Most of the ones I'll mention here are free, but one of them is proprietary. And what I would say is also I'll give links, and I would highly recommend that you follow them in order to learn more. And just generally, before I start, I would really emphasize that I do think technical solutions are probably the future. I think a number of problems that we face in the archival world, I think, are increasingly likely to involve some sort of technical solution. Okay, so let's look at one that I've personally found quite useful a few times, and this is one that relates to free OCR. So for those of you that don't know, OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. And this essentially allows you to transcribe editable text from images. So essentially what it means is you could take a photograph of a book or a page, and that you could create a way where you could take the image from that and you could make the text appear, say, in a Microsoft Word document. There are many proprietary options, but OCR Space is a free one that's online that I think would be worth reviewing. Okay, so let's take a look at this image here. As you'll see, this is an image. This originally came from a JPEG. As you can see, probably from looking at it on the screen, this currently is an image format, which makes it very hard to edit. Okay, so let's see how this works. So essentially what you could do is you could drag and drop an image file here, and any detected text will come up here. However, for the purposes here, I'm going to choose a file. So you'll notice that I'm uploading an image file here with text on it. You'll notice from the extension it's a JPEG. I'm going to start the OCR. Okay, so that was really quick. That was less than 0.4 of a second. And you'll notice that the image is here and that the text is here. And you'll notice as well that the text can be edited, it can also be cut, and it can also be pasted. So the image from the file essentially ended up here. Okay, so a quick review of OCR Space. This can save an immense amount of time transcribing or copying text from an archive, book or image, so it can be a massive time-saving device. The only thing I would say is you probably need something more powerful for very small writing or handwritten records, although editing is always faster than writing from scratch. So even if it's not perfect first time, even if there's a few errors, I would say it's probably easier to correct those errors than it is to try to transcribe it from scratch. And just generally, I would say, although OCR Space seems quite good and I've used it before, I would personally avoid uploading sensitive or personal documents just in case. I would always recommend be very careful with that, and that's probably something I should have emphasized more at this video, is that whenever you are using softwares, especially free ones or ones that are available online, is do be careful with what you upload. Okay, so let's look at another one that's quite useful that a few of you might already know of. If not, then I thoroughly recommend it, and this is reverse image searching. So this is available on Google Image Search if you click the camera icon, and it's fantastic for photographs, especially when they don't have any metadata. So, for example, do you know what this image is? Some of you might already do. If you're from the same country as me, then you might have already identified it. But if not, then I've come up with a way that might be easier for you to do this. Okay, so let's see if we can identify what the image is. So you would click on the camera icon. I'm going to choose upload an image. Now you likely won't be able to see me uploading it here, but you'll see it in just a second. The file is now uploading, and there we can see it here. So this is the image that you just saw, and Google Images has rightly guessed that it is Ben Nevis. So you can see the advantages of this. If you have a photograph or an image and you really don't have any idea what it is or where it's from, I would honestly try putting it through Google Images. A few years ago I was working on a photographer's archives in a volunteer role, and he had taken photographs of a number of very famous people, and by running some of their images through Google Reverse Image I was able to identify a good number of them. So I'd always recommend it. I think it's always worth a try, and it's a software and a technology that I only think is going to get a lot stronger. Okay, Droid. So Droid relates is the only is the only example in here that relates strongly to digital preservation. It's free to download from the National Archives and it is highly recommended. And essentially what Droid does is it allows you to automate profiling of files, so you can generate rapid metadata in report form about a set of files in terms of their format, age and size, etc. I highly recommend you look at the description of Droid in the National Archives website, but I'll give you a quick overview of how it works. So, say for example, we want to collect metadata in this random set of files. These are a random set of files that I've collected just purely for example purposes. Okay, and the way it would work is you would create a new task. You would add the files via a folder. You'll note that the folder extension, although it would be hard for you to validate this from home, but I'd imagine it looks about right. You press start, and then from that you can generate a report which would be as follows. And you'll see here now there is a report of those files which has been generated, and you'll see that there's metadata, for example, about the different formats that have been used. So for example, there's 2 PNG files, and there's also information about the file sizes, so forth, and the sort of average file size by format. So as I say, Droid is really good for generating vast amounts of highly accurate information very quickly, and it's the sort of task that to do this by hand or to do this without any technological assistance would be very difficult, and it would also be very error prone. So that's one of the real recommendations of technology. So Filemaker Pro, that is the proprietary software in this list, but you do get quite a free generous trial period, and the software generally is quite affordable. I used it in a previous role and I've since downloaded a personal copy which I use for general information management, which I'm about to demonstrate. It's more popular in North America than the United Kingdom, I would say, but it's definitely very useful. And essentially Filemaker Pro allows you to create customizable databases and applications. Okay, so let's look at some examples of the applications and databases you can make with Filemaker Pro. So over the last couple of years, I've been using Filemaker Pro to record information I've picked up about digital preservation. So for example, I was able to create an application that would give me guidance to information about media types. So for example, you can see here that I created an application where you can search for different types of media, and depending on what you click, you'll get different images and different considerations. And also created another application using Filemaker Pro where I could search for a certain term, and it would search for that term across multiple databases, such as here and again here, just to give you an example. Another one, and these are just a few I was able to create, was one for calculating recommendations. So for example, I was able to work in an application, and again, this wasn't really hard to pick up. I should add that I don't have any background in coding, it's just that the software makes it quite easy to edit and create application information in this way. So for example, I was able to create something that resembled a resource calculator, where you could calculate your resources across certain metrics, and then depending on what you did, you'll see that you get a number of different options, or where, for example, you could put in sort of key terms and get relevant case studies, depending on what you were looking at. So those are two examples from digital preservation. Okay, and a couple of more general examples would be one that I created specifically for searching for resources. So for example, I was able to use Filemaker Pro to create an application where I could create a list of different archival resources and then check for those resources across various suppliers. So for example, in this case, I've searched for Melanix across various suppliers. As you'll see that Conservation Resources have given some results. You can see Melanix in here. You could always try Google. You see that some have came up for Google as well. So it's a quicker way to search for information. Another example, one I did that actually turned out to be really useful. This was one that was a little bit more created on the spot. Ad hoc was one for finding correlations between ISAG and MARC. So for those of you that aren't familiar, ISAG is a cataloguing standard often used by archivists for archival collections, while if you're a librarian, you might be slightly more familiar with MARC, which is a cataloguing standard for cataloguing library books. Now, the two are by no means interchangeable, but there is some overlap. And it's not uncommon, especially if it's an archivist cataloguing a library collection or a librarian cataloguing an archival collection, that you'll see some people have maybe catalogued in their preferred standard. One of the things I was able to do was work on an application that might create some overlap. So you'll see here, you'll see some quite frankly random entries of information in an ISAG format. And I created a script where I was able to convert this into MARC. So again, first, another thing I would say is if you are familiar with MARC, or in fact this might be more relevant if you're not familiar with MARC, this isn't quite perfect. There should be integers here. So if you look at a MARC record, you'll note, for example, sometimes it will be an A, B and a C, for example, to enter the different information. But the idea is just to show the sort of, give a basic overview of the overlaps. So you'll see, for example, here that MARC 100, that's where my name is, corresponds roughly to the name of the creator field in ISAG. So that's an example of an application I was able to create for a very specific task that I've barely used since. Okay, so a couple of others. So Fixity and Online MD5. These are technologies which allow you to create checksums. So if you aren't sure what a checksum is, I would thoroughly recommend you take a look at it. Essentially, a checksum is a way of creating a digital signature that allows you to ensure the authenticity of a document or file. So that's highly recommended if you're ever involved in any sort of digital preservation. Audacity is another one. This one is for working with and editing audio files, and I've used that one as well. That one's free and open source and highly recommended. And lastly, I would also say don't underestimate Microsoft Excel. It's quite a basic one, and I'm sure most people watching this video will have used an Excel sheet at some point. You can do quite a lot with Microsoft Excel, and I'm actually planning a separate video about how you could do a cataloguing project, an archival cataloguing project using Microsoft Excel in terms of a content management system. So definitely, that's definitely a software that I think is worth learning more about if possible. So otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please feel more than free to leave comments in the bottom and also make recommendations. Thanks again. And if you enjoy these videos, I would be extremely grateful if you could like, subscribe and share. And also just to remind you that I would be absolutely delighted to take any requests for future videos also.